So it's Raheem Nelson from No Starving Artists. I'm here with the incredible MC Skyzoo. We're going to be talking about The Mind of a Saint, the Snowfall inspired album that just dropped. Skyzoo can give us a quick intro on what you do and what you're about.
Oh man, I'm Skyzoo, MC, lyricist, ghostwriter in Brooklyn, New York. And that pretty much sums up, what people know me for.
Spectacular. So let's just get into it. Tell me about your love of the show Snowfall and how it inspired this album.
I started watching Snowfall. I kind of got into it kind of late. It came out in 2017, but in 2017, my son was on the way. So I was dealing with, baby showers and gender reveals and doctor's appointments, as well as working on In Celebration of Us, which was the album that I was in the middle of while all that was happening. So between the album and the studio and, getting ready for my son's arrival, like I really didn't have a lot of time, outside of that. And a lot of people in my circle was like, yo, you gotta start watching Snowfall, man. You a Wire guy. everybody knows I love The Wire. I was like, yo, you a Wire guy, so you'll love Snowfall. And I didn't doubt that, the 80s, the birth of crack and the epidemic and the inner city and all that and our people. Like I knew I would love it, but I just didn't have the time at the moment to get into it. So I said, yeah, I'm gonna check it out. And then time went on, and I hate jumping in a show when they're in the middle of, 2, 3, 4 seasons in, and I got to start at the beginning because there's just so much to catch up on. You got to be careful of spoilers on the internet. So I was like, oh man, they're already 2, 3 seasons out, so I never had the chance to catch it. And then during COVID 2020, we all had all the time in the world. So I said, all right, you know what? No better time than the present. And I jumped on it. And when I started it, man, I couldn't stop. I ran through, at that point, they were up to the beginning or the middle of season 4. I think they was at the middle of season 4, something like that. And man, I ran through all of that in like a weekend. When I started, it was just I was doing a season a day, 10 episodes. I was doing a season a day. And it was like, I would start at, 8, 9 o'clock, and I'd say, all right, one more and I'm gonna go to sleep. One more and I'm gonna go to sleep. And next thing I know, it's 7 in the morning. And I finished the season and the sun is out. And I'm like, yo, what happened? And that's how it started, man. And, I've been a Snowfall aficionado ever since, and I'm all the way invested. I'm all the way tapped in.
Cool. So what was it like rapping from the perspective of the protagonist, Franklin Saint? Can you tell me a little bit about that?
Yeah, it was dope, because the idea of taking a fictional character that represents realistic times, that's something that you have to walk such a thin line as a writer. And I think it's what separates, the boys from the men, right? That's the old saying. I think it separates the rappers from the writers. Like, yeah, you a rapper, that's cool. You even an MC, that's great. But being a real writer, beat or no beat, being a writer and being able to tap into certain nuances, being able to say certain things that mean this but mean that, reflect this while reflecting that or deflecting that, that's a difference. And this project shows it. If there was never a project that showed it before, this project shows that. It's beyond being an MC and a rapper and even a lyricist. It's being a writer. From the poetic side, from the intricate side to the academia of it all. It's a whole different experience. And taking someone who is a fictional character but represents realistic times and being able to tie those two together to make it believable. And also saying things on the record that, okay, so I couldn't just talk about whatever happened in the show because then there will be no reason for you to listen to it.
Yeah.
If I said, I went and did this and then Leon did that and then Kevin did this. Yeah, we knew that already. We watched the show, So what I had to do was create this world within that world that doesn't exist, but could have. I'm not going out on the cuff and saying me and Leon was in the Bahamas and we was chilling on a boat. I'm not doing that. I'm doing things that didn't happen in the show, but could have been written in the show, almost as if they were lost pages of the script. Because what I'm saying taps directly into the show. I'm using parts from the show. I'm using dialogue from the show in my rhymes, little quotes. I'm using them in my lines. I'm using the exact stories, places, names, people, events, times, things like that. And then I'm expanding on them. You look at Panthers and Powder, you look at Views from the Valley, you look at 100 to 1, you look at Bodies. Like I'm expanding on these things that the script already started. And that's what makes it believable and realistic for people.
Yeah, excellent, excellent. So what was it like working with the other guys on the production side?
It was great. You know, they're very, very great producers. I think there's a difference between beat makers and producers, the same way it is a difference between a rapper and an MC, and then MCs and just straight up writers who can do it all. You know, they're producers. They always send stuff fully produced. They always play stuff fully produced with intros, outros, hooks, pre-chorus, bridge, change ups, all these different things. Well, all you got to do is write and get busy. On top of that, you know, I'm a producer as well, not in the sense of tapping on the MPC or the machine or whatever, but more so producing a record and saying, okay, let's put these skits here. Let's add some live trumpet here. Let's add some keys here. You know, I brought in Sean Taylor. I brought in Aaron Harden and all these musicians that I always use. Okay, these are the beats. I need you to add this on top of it, play this on top of it, you know, coming up with those arrangements for certain parts of the records. And then the skits and the transitions and the beat interludes, and a lot of that stuff was me, you know, me saying, okay, let's put this beat that you gave me. I'm not gonna rhyme to it, but we're gonna make it a beat interlude at the end of this record. We're gonna make it a beat interlude at the end of that record. You know, we're gonna use that as a transition. Things that the record is saying. There's one on there at the end of 100 to 1, where the beat interlude is saying, have a heart. Have a heart. It's saying have a heart. And then it goes into bodies. You know, all that was on purpose. So it's stuff that the listener may not catch on first listen, but the music critic and you should get that. You know what I mean? To whoever they may be. So, you know, have a heart, and then it subconsciously goes into bodies. Like, have a heart of what you're doing. And then boom, it goes into a record about killing all these people and being heartless. You know, so those were the moments that I brought in. But as far as the beats and the production, the other guys went bananas. You know, I tell people all the time, there were certain things we could not do on this record.
Yep.
You know, we walked into it with a list of things we couldn't do. We couldn't make it sound like the 80s as far as the beats, because no one would want to hear that in 2023, a bunch of beats that sound like 1986. We couldn't make it sound like LA beats, because I'm from Brooklyn, New York, and everybody knows that. So how do I look one day waking up and rhyming over a bunch of DJ Quick inspired beats and Dr. Dre inspired beats and Battle Cat inspired beats? We couldn't do that. We also couldn't make a bunch of New York beats. I couldn't give you a bunch of Pete Rock sounding beats, a bunch of Large Professor sounding beats, because even though I'm from New York, I'm telling an LA story. I'm telling a story based in LA. Can't do that. You know, I can't give y'all these New York sounding, quote unquote, boom bap, authentic 90s beats that everybody knows me for rhyming on. So what can we do? And that was where we found a middle ground production wise. Beats that, even if I wasn't talking about Snowfall, you could want to hear me or anybody else rhyme on these beats in 2023. But they still give you a feeling that makes sense talking about stuff in 86. And it was a very thin line that the other guys had to walk, and they walked it. They walked it easily. So it was dope. It was very dope working with them on this. And we checked the boxes that we needed to, and we didn't check the boxes that we didn't need to. And that was the point of it all.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So in terms of, and this will be a two-part question too, in terms of reception, A, how has the reception been from Skyzoo fans across the board? And two, like, have you had a chance to share the album with like the actual cast or the director or whatever? Because I was kind of curious about that too.
Yeah, the response has been amazing. You know, it's been very overwhelming. It's been sweeping across the board. You know, I know what I do. I know what I'm capable of. I know what God has blessed me with talent-wise. And I know how I get down. But, you know, my fan base is extremely loyal, and they know what I'm here for, and they know what I'm not here for. So a part of me was like, well, man, you know, I'm making an album where the whole thing is about coke and money and guns and all these different things, but it's not from a glorified side, but it's still there.
Yeah.
How are people going to get that? Are they going to understand the concept of what I did? And thankfully they did. Like 99.9% they did. Like, they're like, yo, this is beautiful. The words I keep seeing are beautiful, masterpiece, art, brilliant, you know, museum. People are like, this belongs in a museum, you know? So it's been overwhelming in a positive way, and I'm extremely appreciative of it, and I'm very humbled by it. You know, I don't take that lightly at all.
Yeah.
And then the second part, I have met with some of the people behind the show. I won't go too crazy into the details, but I have met with them. Shout out to my man Doug Banker, who hooked me up with my man Trevor Engelson, who's one of the executive producers of the show.
Cool.
And he's a hell of a dude, incredible dude. And you know, I was able to sit with them and build on the project before it came out, and you know, they loved everything about it. And we are, you know, we trying to see what could shake out of it. You know, I'll leave it at that. We trying to see what could shake out of it. But I know it has made its way into the Snowfall world. Even before it came out, they had the early advanced copy of it. It did make their way. It made its way into their world.
Yeah, I believe it. That's really excellent.
Yeah.
So next question would be, and I'm gonna switch this up a little bit. So we had talked about this a little bit before the album came out, just the concept of intelligent coke rap. And I remember on last album you did, like, is it could have been a trap rapper or something like that?
I was supposed to be a trap rapper.
Yeah, it's supposed to be a trap rapper. When you made that song, had you already been conceptualizing this album, or like, are those two just kind of independent of each other?
Nah, they're independent, but it just goes back to what I've always said, even on that record. You know, the world I grew up in made this album easy for me to write because I know the talk, I know the lingo, I know what it's about, I know the stories, I know the horror stories, I know the glory side of it, or whatever that might be, the what you think is the glory of it, right? The money and this, that, and the third. I know all of that just from being side by side with it. You know, I tell people all the time, Rich Paul, who's LeBron's agent and an agent for a ton of different, you know, superstar NBA players, he knows basketball, right? Like he knows, he could see a kid playing and say that kid got what it takes, or that kid almost has it if he works on this, or that kid could be great if he did this, but he probably isn't going to be able to get there. He can look at players and say, yo, excuse me, this guy is great. He would be better off on this team.
Yeah.
He shouldn't go to this team over here. He should go on that team because what he does suits them better. He never put on a jersey and shorts in his life, but he knows the game because he's with them every day. So it's the same thing. I never had to put on a jersey and a pair of shorts in my life. But I know how that world works because I was with those guys every day. Those guys are some of my closest friends growing up. I was with those guys every day. Some of those guys are in jail now. Some of those guys are dead now. Some of those guys are still with me side by side, coming to every show with me, you know? So I know that world. I'm like Rich Paul for it. You know what I mean? Like I know that world without having to ever put on a jersey or a pair of shorts, you know? So that's why I'm making this album. It wasn't hard in the sense of, man, I never made a coke rap album. How am I going to do it and make it believable? That wasn't really hard. You know, that wasn't hard at all. And making it where people understand it and respect it. And you would think, dag, did Sky really go out there and get busy? Because I'm talking about the ills and the other side of it so intensely. And with such believability, it's like, was he really out? Maybe he was. Maybe he just hid that from us. You know what I mean? Like, that's what you might get from it as a listener, you know, because it's your first time hearing me walk down this road. And I'm not bragging about it. I'm not glorifying it. I'm saying, hey, this is a world that exists on this television show, which reflects a real world that we went through as a people in this country. And here's what it did and what it's continuing to do.
Yeah, I hear that. Yeah, just from the times I've listened to it so far, it's like, it's the narrative, like it not only puts me in that, you know, Snowfall world, but like just in the 80s and everything. So, you know, I was like super young at that time as well, but like watching the show, thinking back, and then just hearing the raps, it's like, wow, this is like a complete story. Like I can visualize this as I'm hearing it. So yeah, I definitely agree with what you're saying. Like if somebody didn't necessarily know your music like on that deep of a level, they might be like, oh, well, like this is just what he does. Like this is the life that he's in. And you're telling a story, like you've been around that, you may not have like participated in all that, but like it really comes through in the rhyme. And like, I think the authenticity really comes through in the raps, like in all your albums really, but this one is like super unique because like you're taking on the voice of this fictional character that's also reflecting back on real life too.
Yep, absolutely.
Yeah, so that's cool. Next question I got. So let's get into some Easter eggs about the album. Specifically, I think Purity. Like, tell me more about that, because like I'm still scratching the surface on that track.
Well, there's a lot of Easter eggs. I mean, you know, even before Purity, which we'll save for last, but before Purity, like if you look at Brick by Brick, there's a line when I said, I'm smart enough to never let you see me in a Benz, never. Watching the show, by the end of it, by where we are at the end of season 5, Franklin has $73 million, in cash, and hidden in a wall, and spread all over, so here's 73 million, but you've never seen him in a Benz. And I noticed that watching the show, and I was like, dang, they never showed him in a Benz or a BMW. He has a Fox Mustang, they call a Ford Mustang, they call it a Fox body Ford or whatever. And you look at the guys around the same time in the 80s in New York or DC or Chicago, you look at in New York, for me being from New York, it was, Alpo and Rich Porter and AZ, and it was Calvin Klein, and it was the real 50 Cent and all these guys that was running around. They was in the Saabs, they was in the Beamers, they was in the Audis, they was in the the Benzes, they was in all that.
Yeah.
And then you look at Franklin and the character of Franklin, how he was never in any of those things, but he had all the money for it. Well, that's because he was so intelligent that he didn't want anyone looking at him. So he knew, I'm not buying a Benz, I'm not buying a Beamer, I'm not buying all that. I'm gonna keep it low.
Right.
And I threw that in the rhyme in a bar. I'm smart enough to never let you see me in a Benz, never. Word to the curtains that these BBS has been. Hit the trunk, there's a pistol and the key between the rims, whenever. So, if you know the show, Franklin will pop the trunk and he has a tire in there with the BBS rims on it, which was big in the 80s. And in the tire, of course, will be a couple keys and a hammer, a gun. So I'm saying there, word to the curtains that these BBS has been, meaning the BBSs, the tire with the rims and all that, that was a curtain that covered up what he had going on. And then behind that curtain, tucked in that tire would be weight, would be a hammer, would be all that, and multiple times throughout the show, you'll see him do that. And so that's what that meant right there, So there's the Easter egg there about the Benz thing. If you know the show, yeah, you're right. They never have shown Franklin in a Benz, So I'm smart enough to never let you see me in a Benz, never, because I caught that, so I threw it in the album, Same thing, earlier on, Views from the Valley, my pops named me after Charlie Brown classmate, the only Negro at the table, but bet I had a plate. If you look at Charlie Brown and the story of Franklin was the only black kid on Charlie Brown, and they had the table, the Thanksgiving meme that always goes crazy every year, where they're sitting at the table and Franklin is kind of sitting by himself, and he's the only black kid in that picture. And you got Charlie Brown and Linus and Lucy and Peppermint Patty and all of them. And the story behind Snowfall is that John Singleton, the creator and genius behind it, he got the name Franklin from the Charlie Brown cartoon. He picked that name because Franklin was the only black kid in Charlie Brown. And on the show, Franklin is the only black kid with the Volpes. He's the only kid like him in that world when he goes to the Valley. But then he's also the only kid like him in his own world on 56th Street in South Central. He's the only kid like that as far as the way he thinks, the way he speaks, his intelligence. Everyone around him is on a different type of time. So he's the only kid the way who he is. And that's how John got the name Franklin. And then Saint came from the fact that he said he would be the opposite of a saint. He would be anything but a saint when it all boils down. So that's how he came up with the name. So there's that. And then Purity, there's a million of them. We could sit here for hours, but when we get to Purity, like you said, the second verse, I looked at it like, okay, the story at this point in the album is 1986, where the series is currently at. And in 1986, South Central LA, Franklin is from South Central, Crenshaw and all that. Well, Nipsey Hussle is from South Central, Crenshaw, Slauson. He's probably the biggest thing from Crenshaw and South Central since maybe Ice Cube, So, in 86, Nipsey was a year old. He was born in 85. His brother Black Sam was born in 82, like me. So they were little kids. They were 4 years old, a year old. They were toddlers and babies. And I said to myself, well, this world that Franklin represents, the character of Franklin representing real life Franklins in LA and all over the country, they built Crenshaw and Slauson to be what it became. By selling crack, by running around, shooting things up, by living the life, whether they were forced to live that, whatever the case may be, because that's a whole nother discussion about how that weight was literally dropped off in our neighborhoods and they told us go play. And we played, so the CIA, the government and all that, like that literally was a plan. So you look at the world that the real life Franklins in 85, 86 built. That's the reason why Nipsey is no longer here with us and able to do all of the beautiful things that he was in the process of doing. You know,
Yeah.
all the things that he was trying to do for the community and for Black folk inside LA and outside of it.
Yep.
The reason why he's no longer here to do those things is because of what the real life Franklins did. So
Yeah.
I just had an idea of what would happen if Franklin met the real life Nipsey and Black Sam and their father DeWitt back in 86 when they were babies. And he would be able to look at them and see, what am I doing to this neighborhood? Because
Yeah.
this neighborhood might turn into something later on that we regret. And what it turned into later on is a world that would take someone like a Nipsey Hussle out, along with the countless others that have been taken out, whether they were famous or not, whether they rapped or not, you know? And being a writer in it, if anybody else came up with that idea, they would have said something like, you know, met this guy and his little son, and the father called him Nipsey, you know, to try to sell it or to try to make it easier for people to get.
Mhm.
Nobody on the planet called Nipsey Hussle Nipsey at a year old.
Mhm.
You know what I mean? He got that
Yeah.
name later. He got
Yeah.
that name in high school or whatever, you know, like he got that name later when he started rapping.
Mhm.
Nobody on the planet called him that as a baby.
Mhm.
So I couldn't say that. I
Right.
couldn't say Black Sam. I had to use their real names. I had to say Sammy. I had to say Ermias, you know, and leave it up to the listener to get that. I had to hope that the listener would pick that up, because that would be bad writing if I said Nipsey. It
Yeah.
was a little kid, his father called him Nipsey. No, he didn't. You can ask DeWitt if he ever called him Nipsey as a baby. The answer is going to be no.
Yeah.
I'll put my house on that. You know what I mean? So, you know, as a writer, I had to make sure it was done the right way and hope that the listener got it.
Mm.
And you know, so that was a huge Easter egg that I was excited to see if people would get it. A few people got it. I knew it was a tough one for people to get. A
Mhm.
few people got it. So then I created the video to put up and really drive it home, and it did. And everybody went crazy, man. It was a
Yeah.
blessing. Everybody, oh my God, I didn't catch it at first, but now I got it. I cried once you explained it, and I heard it again. Yo, this was amazing. This was the greatest Nipsey tribute ever. Like, I've seen all that, you know. I didn't do it thinking it would be a Nipsey tribute. I did it as a way to show love to Nip, of course, but also to use that to explain how we got to that point of someone like him not being here and others in that similar position. And also to make the Snowfall world and me doing this album connect with the real world. Because again, it's an album about a show that's fictional, but that show represents real times that really happened. So
Gotcha.
it was a way for me to connect it. You know, it was a way for me to bring that and show people, see, this is a real world thing. This is a real world situation. Even though Franklin is a make-believe character, what he represents is something that really happened. Here's the proof. The stuff that he represents that really happened took this dude out and took out countless others like him, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. So, wow, two things off of that. One, I really appreciate that you have such regard for your audience that like you're not spoon feeding anybody information. Like the bars are layered, the storytelling is complex, and you're not going to catch it that first time. Like I've always appreciated that about your music. Like it's encouraged to like go back and listen, you know, discover those gems. And I think like it's just so cool that this entire concept album, it's not surface level. Like it easily could have been, but like
Right.
that's not your style anyway. So like it's just like so deep and like pays homage to this, that, and the third, and
Yeah.
you're connecting it back to the real world. Like that's brilliant.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you, man.
Definitely. So any closing thoughts on the album and like how you're feeling having completed it, you know, doing on this run and everything, just promoting?
Yeah, it's been great. You know, it was a lot of fun making this album. I'm excited that people are loving it. I'm excited for people to hear it and continue to appreciate it. It's only been 3 days. It's only 3 days old, you know, so
Yeah.
newborn, you know what I mean? And I'm
Yeah.
excited for people to continue to just love it and be into it and find more. There's so many Easter eggs, man. There's literally a million in here, man. It's so many in here for people to find, and I'm excited for that. The
Yeah.
aha moments. People go, aha, I get that now. Like, you know, so I'm excited for that. I'm honored that I was able to do something to give back to the show, to give back to the culture, what the show represents, and to really continue to take the show to another level. Not that it needed it, but to another level, and just cross and bridge the gaps with the show and current nowadays, the culture and hip hop, and be able to do something really special. glad I was able to do it with the other guys who are fantastic producers and who really put their foot in this album. And it's been great for all of us. You know, one of the things people ask me, they say, yo, when you made the album, did you have to go back and rewatch Snowfall while you were writing it? And no, I didn't, because I'm that invested in the show. I didn't have to go rewatch one single episode. I've seen every episode 3-4 times. I didn't have to go watch one single episode again. Not once did I turn the show on.
That's amazing.
I just went off memory as if it really was my life. I remember all the names, places, people, dates, timings, what they was wearing. I remember all of it because I'm that invested in the show as a fan. So like there's a moment where on Apologies in Order, when I say first one through the door should always have a key. Well, there's an episode, season 3, maybe episode 7 or 8, when they're looking for melody. And, you know, Andre goes to Franklin and says, hey, man, I need you to help me find melody. And when Franklin goes and gets Leon and they go look for her, and Leon says something to Franklin along the lines of, how you don't know where she at? And Franklin goes, man, why everybody acting like that's my girl? That ain't my girl. And Leon says to him, first one through the door always got a key. Meaning like the first person to hit it, first person to be with her, because they was each other's first person to be with her is always going to have a key. They're always going to be able to walk through the door whenever you want. So that was one quick little line in the script that I took and threw in a line in the song. When I'm talking to Melody, apologizing to her, first one through the door should always have a key, but I had 20 more in the trunk, gift wrap for me. So I'm taking the play on words with the key where I'm like, yeah, the first one through the door should always have a key to be able to get to you, but I was too preoccupied with this other 20 keys of coke that I have in the trunk. I was too preoccupied with that to use this key that I've always had to get back to you and be in touch with you and make sure you was good. My attention waned and I was over here with these 20 keys in the trunk. First one through the door should always have a key, but I had 20 more in the trunk, gift wrap for me, you know? So I didn't have to go back and rewatch the show and be like, oh man, that's right, Leon did say that. I remembered that. I remembered that as something I wanted to use as a metaphor, you know?
Amazing, man. So how can people find you online? How can people cop the album, listen to the album, and just support what you're doing?
Well, the album's out everywhere. You know, digital is out now on all streaming platforms. The CDs and the cassettes are coming within the month. You know, we got a lot of pre-orders on those. And the vinyl is not out yet, only because we're doing the vinyl probably in the summer. We're going to drop a deluxe version of the album because if you know the show, they're 5 seasons down, 1 season left. So the 6th season is the final season coming up in a month or so. Well, the story has to finish being told, right? Like on the album, I'm talking about everything up until the end of season 5. And after that, all this stuff is going to happen in season 6. Whoever's going to die, whoever's going to go to jail, whoever's going to get away free, whatever's going on, a lot of things are going to happen in season 6. Well, I got to finish the story. So I'm going to have to go make 3-4 new songs that finish up the story. So instead of doing the vinyl twice, I said, well, let's just wait on the vinyl and make a deluxe version of the vinyl in the summer. After the show ends in April, I'll go make a couple more records to finish telling the story of however this thing ends, because I don't have any insider tips. I don't know what's going to happen. I can guess, but I don't have any insider tips or anything like that. So after all that happens, then we finish these records that say whatever happened in this world. So-and-so died, so-and-so got locked up, they did such and such to me as Franklin, whatever it is, I got to go make those records.
Cool. Yeah. Really looking forward to that deluxe. It's going to be great to see how everything wraps up and how, you know, you put your spin on Franklin's story. Because, you know, I just love the concept so far. And, you know, I'm like a new fan of the show. You know, I've been rocking with you for a minute. And it's cool to just have like this concept album from you that I can listen to and also be watching the show at the same time, discovering that. So like, I'm excited. A lot to look forward to.
Thank you, man. I appreciate it.
Of course. Yeah. Thank you for your time, Sky. Like really taking part of your day to, you know, just have this interview with me. Like it's been a great conversation. I appreciate it.
No doubt. Glad I was able to do it.
Absolutely. Yeah, we got it.
All right, man. Peace.
Peace, Sky.